Canadian Medical Association is deeply sorry for the harms First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples have experienced and continue to experience in the Canadian health system.
An apology today for the harms done to Indigenous people by medical professionals. The Canadian Medical Association formally apologized in Victoria. First Nations, Inuit, and Métis dignitaries were there to receive the apology and provide ceremony throughout the presentation. The CMA's president acknowledged the historic and current discrimination that Indigenous Canadians face in the healthcare system and addressed the broken trust between health providers and Indigenous people. Thanks for joining us. I'm Megan Roberts. The CMA calls the racism and discrimination that Indigenous people and healthcare providers face deplorable. In the apology, the association cited several examples of harm done to Indigenous people, including the Indian hospital system, forced and coerced sterilization, and medical experimentation. Susana De Silva takes us through the apology and what happens next.
The Canadian Medical Association is deeply sorry for the harms First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples have experienced and continue to experience in the Canadian health system. The racism and discrimination that Indigenous peoples and healthcare providers face is deplorable, and we are deeply ashamed.
Well, the day began with dance and song and ceremony to reflect on those Indigenous people who've been lost and hurt by neglect within the medical system. They also detailed how they got to today, the journey to getting to this apology, which of course included speaking with Indigenous communities, but they also went through 150 years of their own records and then detailed in painful detail some of the examples in which Indigenous peoples have been treated by medical professionals in this country, everything from neglect to disparities in how people are treated, to sending ill patients far from their homes and giving them treatments they did not consent to things like forced and coerced sterilization, but also experimentation on children in residential schools and even adults.
Medical experimentation was conducted on Indigenous adults, including studying the effects of nutritional interventions and testing experimental tuberculosis vaccines and treatments. We still do not know the full extent of medical experimentation on Indigenous children or adults.
And of course, they are also not talking just about historical harms. We know that now Indigenous communities in this country still face worse health outcomes than other Canadians, and so they are talking about that issue. We, of course, have examples like Joyce Echequan, who died in a Quebec hospital just 4 years ago, while just after videotaping and seeing professionals there hurling racist remarks at her. So the association says, you know, they cannot go back and change what happened in the past, but they are acknowledging it, apologizing, and promising to move forward. They listed a number of steps and different things they plan to do. One of those is, of course, trying to advance those health outcomes of Indigenous populations to see those things like infant mortality rates, life expectancy improve. They're also going to go through their own code of conduct and policies to look at the parts about discrimination and racism, try to strengthen those things. They're also going to look to increase representation, not only within the medical professional community, but within their organization as a whole. But of course, this is just the beginning of a journey. We heard from an elder there today who talks about his wife who experienced a forced sterilization, and he says there is a long road ahead.
It's going to take a long time because there's a lot of damage and harm that was done to our people, and many of them to this day will not even address that. They will not admit it. Many, I know many. And that's the fact of the matter. We need the truth first. And I'm so happy that the Canadian Medical Association has taken the first steps.
But he, like many again today, emphasizing that this has to just be a first step, that an apology like this is meaningless if real action doesn't come afterwards.
That was Susana De Silva reporting in Vancouver. Let's hear more now of that apology from the Canadian Medical Association.
As the national voice of the medical profession, we are sorry for the actions and the inactions of physicians, residents, and medical students that have harmed Indigenous peoples. We recognize the significant power that physicians have historically had and continue to have in the health system. Physicians play a critical role in the provision of health care, and they have obligations and accountabilities to patients, to the health system, and society. As an association, our purpose is to support the medical profession and create a more sustainable, accessible, and equitable health system for all patients and providers. In failing to address systemic anti-Indigenous racism in healthcare, we have failed to fulfill this purpose. We have not lived up to the ethical standards the medical profession is expected to uphold to ensure the highest standard of care is provided to patients and trust is fostered in patients, in physicians, residents, and medical students. We realize we have left Indigenous peoples out of that high standard of care. To Indigenous peoples living in Canada, we apologize to you. We are sorry. We are sorry we have lost your trust and for the harms that you, your ancestors, your families, and your communities have experienced.
Although Canadians believe healthcare is a fundamental human right, Indigenous peoples have consistently been met with routine discrimination at the hands of the medical professionals in Canada. That is a truth. We have to have truth before we can have reconciliation. That is the truth. I have always believed we need to know the truth before we can have reconciliation. I've always believed in that. By issuing this formal apology, the Canadian Medical Association has taken the first steps in its commitment to seeking the truth. It's just a first step. It's going to be a long process. Kinwes kanutsih tanaw, tagawimi sa huswa, tagawimi oyayak. It's going to take a long time.
If this story has affected you, there is support whenever you need it. The Hope for Wellness helpline offers 24/7 assistance. It can be reached at the number on your screen. That is 1-855-242-3310. For online support, you can also visit their website at hopeforwellness.ca. Yukon RCMP have called in experts to help with the search for a missing American. An underwater recovery team is on site where a truck plunged into the Yukon River on Monday morning. The CBC's Cheryl Kawacha has the latest.
The special dive team flew into Whitehorse Tuesday evening, and you can see they're actually in the water behind me right now, searching for the truck. Police say there are numerous factors that are making this very difficult, including the current, the speed with which the water is moving here. You can see it's very swift. Also, coloration has been a challenge. So they're hoping with the divers in the water that they'll be able to locate that main vehicle. What they don't know is whether or not the missing man is in that vehicle or whether the body may have floated downriver.
We have had boats in the water since the morning of and patrols up and down the river from Schwatka Lake on up. The gates are open. We had representative from Yukon Energy, and we've continually, we spoke with them as early as this morning as well about the process and down at the dam. So we're all working together on this endeavor.
The accident happened early Monday morning. Two men from Arizona were traveling south on the Alaska Highway when they approached the bridge. Their pickup was towing a trailer and several smaller vehicles, and they missed the bridge and went over the bank here. One of the men was able to get out of the river. He was taken to hospital, and police say he has now been released. The RCMP say the search will continue using boats, divers, and drones. Cheryl Kawacha, CBC News, at the Lewis River Bridge outside Whitehorse.
People in Rankin Inlet want answers about the progress of the community's $7.4 million utilidor replacement. Residents say they're not getting any information about how long the project will take or if they'll be affected by construction. The CBC's Selma Eccles has that story.
Signs, fences, and road closures have been a common sight around Rankin Inlet. Drivers taking longer routes to get to their homes. the new utilidor systems are being installed to replace outdated pipes and to allow new houses to be built in the future. Construction crews have dug at least 2 meters below ground, right beside dugout Curley's home.
We have not heard anything from the hamlet and the government and how long it will take. The public needs to be informed. We have no access to the garbage bins as well, so we have been taking our garbage straight to the dump.
Earlier this spring, the hamlet of Rankin Inlet tabled a letter to the legislature of Nunavut stating the utilidor is in a critical breaking point. Deputy Mayor Danny Kaumag says the hamlet is doing regular updates on social media.
At the hamlet, we have a hamlet page. We usually try to inform the community. As you know, everybody has Facebook now and all that. So we're trying to, what we do is try to update the community where the road closures are going to be and update them once in a while.
Kaumag says they also do updates on the local radio. Selma Eccles, CBC News, Rankin Inlet.
We have more details for you tonight on recent updates to Yellowknife's emergency and evacuation plans. A review into the city's response to last year's wildfire called for better coordination and communication guidelines. Yesterday, Yellowknife released updated plans that addressed that call. The documents have details on who would be helping in the case of an emergency. Roles and responsibilities for partners and non-government organizations are also outlined. Yellowknife Mayor Rebecca Alty says these are all steps towards fulfilling the review's recommendations.
A number of the actions are complete or underway, so staff will be coming forward again in either October or November to provide a more comprehensive, this is complete, this is in progress, this is still to come.
Of the 26 recommendations in the report, 23 are underway and 8 have been completed. The Yellowknife review is one of several into last year's wildfire season in the Northwest Territories. There's actually another underway right now by a company called Transitional Solutions Incorporated. It was hired by the Northwest Territories government to complete the independent review, and it held a public session in Yellowknife yesterday to hear what people think. The CBC's Nadir Hashmi has that story.
The contractor says one of the biggest challenges they've been facing is gaining people's trust because the public thinks the contractor represents the government.
I think that there is some fear that we're looking to place blame, that we're looking to identify what went wrong. And so I think people are a little bit worried to engage with us. And I think also people are afraid to engage with us because they think we're maybe from the government or maybe that their information isn't going to be confidential.
Thomas emphasizes that these findings will be submitted to an oversight committee and not the government directly.
We are hired by the government as an arm's-length third party to work independently.
Thomas also knows that while the government may review the report before it's made public, it will not be altered.
I assume the government will read the after-action review before it becomes a public document, but my understanding is that it's not a document that will be edited and sanitized.
The team conducted workshops with government officials earlier this month and did their first public engagement session on Tuesday. Some members of the public said there's a need for further improvements in several areas. This includes better communication, a clearer plan for reintegration of government housing services, and providing equal per diems to all evacuees. Thomas says they'll be visiting other communities next, including Betchacon, Deta, Wequity, Enterprise, and Fort Simpson.
We are going to be visiting 11 different remote communities within the Northwest Territories to do the same thing, to engage with community and be in community and understand the stories and understand what happened in 2023.
Once the public engagement sessions wrap up in October, the team will compile a report outlining their findings and recommendations, and that will be submitted by this year in December. Nadir Hashmi, CBC News, Yellowknife.
Scientists are studying the threat of heavy metals leaching from thawing permafrost. A new study from the University of Southern California is warning about what they're calling a mercury bomb. A bomb they say is waiting to explode in Yukon waterways. Mercury is a toxic metal that is naturally absorbed into the soil. In the north, it's stored underground in permafrost over thousands of years. Warming weather threatens that storage system. This study comes from the University of Southern California, as we mentioned, as well as the Yukon River Intertribal Watershed Council. And it says a substantial amount of mercury is stored in the Yukon River's banks. Isabel Smith is the study's lead author. She says there are consequences of rapidly accelerating permafrost thaw.
One thing that permafrost is doing is that it's kind of stabilizing some of our banks and when it comes to like rivers. And our project is really focusing on riverbank erosion. And so when rivers are eroding these banks, you have these large deposits of sediments that are going into the river. And when we lose this permafrost, that happens a lot quicker and you can erode a lot more sediments. The big thing with mercury is not just mercury, but methylmercury, which is another form, is what we're worried about, because that is the form that bioaccumulates and is available to organisms. So that's why they often tell you to limit how much fish you're intaking. And so usually diet is the main way that people are exposed to mercury specifically.
Researchers say the long-term impacts on traditional hunting and fishing could be devastating. Smith says the best way to avoid this outcome is to mitigate climate change. The research team is now trying to figure out how quickly mercury is being released. Another lottery for residential lots is happening next month in the Yukon. The government is releasing 7 lots in 3 communities. 1 lot is in Haines Junction, 1 is in Watson Lake, and 5 are in Mayo. Lottery applications are now open. They'll be accepted until October 4th, and then the draw will happen on October 9th. 3 industrial lots are also being released in Haines Junction and Teslin. They were released by public tender yesterday.
Why, hello.
You want it? I got it. This is so cool.
Focus, focus, focus.
Here we go. Whoa, imagine how good the TV's gonna look now.
Oh, God!
This is incredible.
Did you know this?
As if.
Could the pressure be any higher?
Every week, the issues that matter to Canadians.
Cost of living hurts everybody.
Connecting politics to people.
Win, win, win.
We are not going back.
Sundays, join me for Rosemary Barton Live.
It makes sense that they get a larger share, or does it?
Welcome to the Greenbelt.
All of this, just single detached homes?
Yes.
What do we know? I think we can explain.
About that with Andrew Chang. Watch free on CBC Gem.
It's got to come from the heart.
I will cry. You're so together.
How much more connected do you want to be? See you there.
Guess what? Pinch me. Yes!
Researchers from around the world are gathering in Edmonton this week for a conference on bears. One of the workshops explores how Indigenous knowledge has been used in polar bear research. Part of that team spoke with our colleagues in Edmonton about a unique relationship in the community of Churchill, Manitoba.
Research, we worked together with Indigenous knowledge holders in the community to explore what coexistence means through Indigenous voices. And we know polar bears are coming into communities more often. Human-bear conflict is increasing, and yet Churchill's really unique in that the community lives alongside polar bears with a high level of tolerance and a lot of reciprocal respect.
So, Georgina, what is your role in the research?
I was helping KT with the research and meeting together with some of our elders and doing sharing circles about how people have coexisted with polar bears in our community for so long.
How often would you see a polar bear if you lived in Churchill?
Well, there's periods throughout the year where you don't see them as much, but September is generally known as the polar bear season. In fact, last Saturday, there was a polar bear on my daughter's front deck.
Oh, really?
And so she had to very quickly, the dog and the bear met nose to nose. And so that was a bit scary.
You got to train your dog in Churchill to be prepared for bears. So, KT, how then did you use Indigenous knowledge in your research?
Yes. So we used some Indigenous methods in this research, which is, I think, what makes it kind of unique and new and important. And so, like, instead of using a traditional social science method like interviews, we actually used storytelling, which draws out sort of the oral narrative tradition of Indigenous knowledge. And by reaching back to the past and then gathering knowledge all the way into the future with future visions, it really mobilized that intergenerational knowledge celebration. So it really was sort of this accidental research as ceremony.
So, Georgina, what was the whole experience like for you? Had you been involved in anything like this before?
No, I'm a retired teacher, and I've been involved in a lot of things, but research was not one of them. But it was the most amazing experience that I've had because it brought our community together. Well, one of the first questions was KT asked our Indigenous knowledge keepers, tell me what you know about polar bears. And they said, well, we don't really know anything about polar bears. And she said, you have to. You've lived with them all your life, you know.
Yeah.
And we did know a lot.
Of course.
And it was really nice to share. And
well, people know more than they think they know, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Was everybody really pleased with this kind of outreach?
Yeah, I think it kind of validated their knowledge. And, you know, what it did for me was make me realize how you live with polar bears and you don't even know that that's a very beautiful thing, you know, like it's amazing how we get through, you know, and live with those polar bears, but don't see it as the heroic thing that it is, you know.
Right.
That was what came through for me.
Thanks to our colleagues in Edmonton for that piece. The Nunavut Legislature's Standing Committee on Oversight of Government Operations and Public Accounts will be holding televised hearings this week. Officials from the Office of the Auditor General of Canada will appear as witnesses tomorrow and Friday. They'll be discussing the territory's most recent public accounts. Officials from the Office of the Languages Commissioner of Nunavut will also be discussing their most recent annual reports. Those discussions will be held on Friday and Saturday. The hearings begin tomorrow at 3 p.m. Eastern Time. Newfoundland and Labrador's Indigenous Affairs and Reconciliation Minister says his government is making progress in partnership with Nunavut. Scott Reid made a guest appearance at the Nunavut Trade Show in Iqaluit today. The Newfoundland and Labrador government signed a memorandum of understanding with Nunavut in February of 2023. It's not legally binding, but it is a commitment to collaborate in several areas, including culture, tourism, and transportation. Reid says they're looking at more training opportunities for Nunavummiut in Newfoundland and Labrador.
We also talked about how we could sort of exchange curriculums and things like that, maybe, and to learn from each other in terms of how to speed up the apprentice process and things like that.
The Memorandum of Understanding is set to be reviewed every 2 years.
And building a brighter future. Thank you.
Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre recently made MP pensions political. For weeks, he accused NDP leader Jagmeet Singh of keeping the government in power in order to qualify for his pension. But experts say Poilievre's own pension is estimated to be more than 3 times that of Singh's. Ashley Burke has that story.
Pierre Poilievre talking about anything but his pension.
A carbon tax election needed because
preferring to stick to his narrative.
Mr. Poilievre's pension. I'm not going to talk to anything like that.
In fact, no Conservative willing to talk after CBC News reported the estimated size of their leader's pension.
What do you think? I'm late for a meeting, thanks.
No comment.
But it was Poilievre who made MPs' pensions an issue.
He wanted his pension.
For weeks, he accused Jagmeet Singh of propping up the Liberals just long enough to qualify for his own MP pension.
Stop being sellout Singh. Put the people ahead of your pension.
Even releasing ads to drive that claim home.
Jagmeet Singh, he gets his pension. Trudeau gets power.
His pension is like 3.5 times in present value terms as compared to that of Jagmeet Singh.
CBC asked this expert to crunch the numbers. He estimates Poilievre could make more than $230,000 annually from his pension once he turns 65. That's the same amount the Prime Minister could make at 67 when his MP pension kicks in too. And if Singh qualifies, he could make more than $66,000 a year at 65.
The main reason why Mr. Poilievre's pension would be around 3.5 times larger is because he has about 3.5 times as much service.
And that has Liberals on the attack.
What Mr. Poilievre has tried to do with Mr. Singh's pension is pretty despicable.
Mr. Poilievre is the ultimate hypocrite.
Singh is also firing back against Poilievre's claim he's putting his pension ahead of Canadians.
It's another tired old lie that Pierre Poilievre likes to say, and it's a lie that he uses to distract from the facts.
A Conservative spokesperson said that Poilievre voted to cut politicians' pensions when he was a member of Stephen Harper's government, and said that Poilievre and Singh's situations are different, claiming that unlike Singh, Poilievre has never tried to keep the government in power to qualify or grow his pension. Singh says he hasn't either. Ashley Burke, CBC News, Ottawa.
The Nunavut Film Development Corporation has appointed a new CEO. Lena Ellsworth will be the first Inuk woman to have the role. The corporation has a mentorship program. It's part of its commitment to develop leadership and Indigenous representation in the screen industry. As part of that program, Ellsworth will shadow the outgoing CEO for the next 2 years. She says it's a great opportunity to learn the new role.
You know, there aren't too many people who go into that field and to those various positions. So being able to learn from someone who has worked in several different positions in that sector is definitely invaluable.
Ellsworth hopes to see more content come from Nunavut and wants Inuit to share their stories in their own language.
The only way we're going to learn and teach languages from hearing every day, all the time. And we'd love to see more of it on TV, radio, online, in school. That's the only way we can preserve it, by speaking it and hearing it all the time.
The film industry in Nunavut has seen one of its largest productions this year with the CBC, Netflix, and APTN produced series North of North. And that is Northbeat for tonight. For news anytime, go to cbc.ca/north. Thank you for watching. I'm Megan Roberts. Have a good night.
every week the issues that matter to